Hello, and thank you for watching 24 Plus. I am ABC24 anchor Pepper Baker. We will be, or Shelby County voters will be voting for a new governor on August 6th for the primaries and then in November for their final choice. So we are profiling the top candidates of the governor's race. And today we have Republican candidate Congressman John Rose at the table. Thank you so much for being here.
It's good to be with you. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. All right. So first, let's just get to it. Why are you running for governor?
Well, you know, I am blessed to have two young sons, an 8-year-old and a 5-year-old. They're the 9th generation of my family to call Tennessee home. And so, you know, that gives you a perspective on thinking about the future. And I want to make sure that the Tennessee we pass on to Guy and Sam is as bright as the life that I've lived here in Tennessee. And I don't think we can take that for granted. I think we've got to have effective, aggressive, determined, energetic leadership to make sure that we keep this state on track and deliver a future for our kids and grandkids that is promising.
Yeah, I think a lot of people can get on board with that. Hard to argue that. So let's unpack that. But first, for the people in West Tennessee or our viewers here who may not be familiar with you, I just always like to ask, who are you? What's your background? And what kind of got you into politics?
Sure. So it's kind of a long road. Politics was not really on my bucket list a few years ago. So I was born in Cookeville in 1965. I'm the youngest of 4, born into a great Christian home, a mom who was a school teacher, though she'd become a full-time mom when I came along, and a dad who was a farmer, and just blessed with that upbringing. We are blessed to have a family farm that's been in our family since 1790. So a 236-year legacy. Grew up in Cookeville, got active in wanting to be on the farm at a young age, wanting to be that 8th generation, and was active in 4-H and FFA. Went to college at Tennessee Tech, later got a master's degree in agricultural economics at Purdue, and then a law degree at Vanderbilt University. While I was at Vandy, I started a business in the IT training space and was blessed. We worked hard, built a business from an idea to success, trained over 4.5 million IT professionals in about 8-year period all around the world. And so we were blessed with that success. That afforded me the opportunity to keep the farm in the family. And so I didn't get interested in politics until our young son Guy was being expected. We were right on the cusp of that. And I started to think about the future at that point and think about the distant future and what kind of country we're going to leave for him. What kind of state would we have for Guy to grow up in? And that's what got me interested in politics. I've now served in Congress for the last 7.5 years. I'm coming home because I think the founders wanted a citizen legislature. They wanted people like us to go serve for a season and then come home. And I've done my service there now, and I'm coming home. But I still think I have some service in me, and so that's why I'm running for governor of Tennessee.
Okay. I, too, am the youngest of 4. So something about the youngest of 4.
The baby.
Yeah,
of the
family.
baby.
There you go. That's a good start there. So the biggest priorities as governor that you would have that would directly impact West Tennesseans, what would those be? Well,
so I hear, you know, we've traveled to all 95 counties, just did our 54th open town hall tour stop in Fayette County a little while ago, listening to Tennesseans about what they want. And so that's what informs me about what Tennesseans want. Certainly, in all of my visits to Shelby County and Memphis, what I hear here is crime is at the top of the list. So we've simply got to provide a safe society that's conducive for families to thrive. And so that's a big issue here. Across the breadth of Tennessee, though, it's education, number 1, infrastructure, number 2, roads, but other things, access to health care, particularly true in rural West Tennessee, access to energy, electricity. Believe it or not, we're turning businesses away today from Tennessee because we don't have the electric power to promise them. And then so often true even in Memphis and our urban areas, but particularly in our rural areas, is economic development, job creation. And those are the issues that I hear Tennesseans talking about in terms of like everyday issues that you'd think about. But the real issue at the top of the list for all Tennesseans seems to be wanting a need to preserve Tennessee for future Tennesseans, the nature and character of our state, the natural beauty of our state, but also the down-home hospitality that we all gather, really appreciate here in Tennessee, and that kind of defines Tennessee as being a little bit different from other places in the country.
Okay. How as Congressman, so 7.5 years, How will that kind of transfer that experience into the role as governor? So like, what have you done as congressman that you think is successful and will carry into your role here as governor?
You know, some of those experiences will be useful, understanding how the federal government works, understanding how the legislative process works. Those will be useful, but mainly I would say not very much transferable from a legislative process to the executive role that the job of governor is. So, you know, the main responsibility that I and other members of Congress have every day is that we decide whether to push that green button or push that red button, whether we vote yes or no. Now, it's a little more complicated than that. You know, I can actually help to fashion what the question is through the legislative process. But the point is, once we decide whether to vote yes or no, we hand that to the executive, in the case of Tennessee, to the governor. And the job of making things happen, of taking ideas and making them reality, there's not a lot about the legislative process that involves that. But my experience of building a business, of literally taking an idea and building a successful business, creating jobs, creating products, serving customers, those are the skills that I think are most applicable to being governor. And I got that experience through 30 plus years in the private sector.
Okay, so yeah, you'll be putting your final stamp of approval as governor as opposed to the legislative part of it.
Well, it's less about that stamp of approval as it is about figuring out how do you take that idea and breathe life into it, finding the right people to help you do that, figuring out what the steps are of how you're going to make something actually happen. And that's the part that I've always enjoyed in the businesses I've built is, figuring out how to marshal resources to actually make something happen, to create something where there was nothing before. You start out with a piece of paper, literally an idea. In the case of legislation, here's the way that the legislature wants things to be. How do we make it that way?
Okay, yeah, and let's get into specifics about what would fall under your leadership as governor. So one of your campaign ads that's getting a lot of talk is the Starbucks one, where you're pouring out the cup of coffee, and then before we get into the Starbucks deal, you mentioned how you are a CEO like Trump. What does that exactly mean?
Yeah, so I think just like President Trump, I've created businesses. I've managed activities to either provide a product or a service in a profitable way, which means that bringing together resources, people, talent, skills, and putting those in the right mix, finding the right person to put in the right seat on the bus, and knowing when sometimes to move them around or take them out of that position and substitute someone in who might do a better job. These are the kinds of skills that, frankly, the job of being governor requires. President Trump, honed those skills through years in his businesses and, much storied career in business. I've done the same in my businesses here in Tennessee. And, I think Tennesseans get that that's the nature of the job of being governor. If you think about the successful governors that we've had in Tennessee through my lifetime, almost all of them, whether Democrat or Republican, have brought those kinds of business skills to the table.
Okay. And you've carried on your family farm legacy, and I think that's very noble. Some CEOs are great. Other people may look at CEOs as forgetting about the little guys on the bottom that make the business run. So in my time here, a lot of West Tennesseans, or particularly Memphis and Shelby Countyans, feel like they don't, it's not, the money doesn't always get over to West Tennessee, or constantly forgotten, or over here is underdeveloped and unloved, if you will. So how would you, if, being a CEO and similar to President Trump, how would you make sure that this area of the state gets some love?
Well, sure. So I think good, successful CEOs who are motivated and trying to do the job well, you show up first, you leave last. And so I think in terms of how I would address West Tennessee and Memphis is to show up, be here. There's no substitute for having your eyes on the problems, right? And then beyond that, I think it's about finding the right team of people and making sure that that team includes people who are deeply invested in all of the communities across Tennessee, that we have the geographic diversity of representation so that Shelby County and Memphis is understood, because there are Shelby Countyans at the table helping to craft the policies that would lead us forward. And then I think you come here and further and more deeply engage the community. That's why I think it's so important that you do what we've been doing by holding open town halls where everyone's welcome and you take all the unfiltered questions and you give unscripted answers. Because I'm actually learning, and I found that in my business, there should never be the only bad question is the one you don't ask. And so, engaging the people right here in Memphis, right here in Shelby County, and saying, what do you see for the future of this city? How do we achieve it? I grew up in a time when Shelby County was regarded, even by folks as far away as where I was, as the capital of the Mid-South. I came here as a young kid to the Mid-South Fair back in the day and was kind of in awe of how neat that was. And so Shelby County has to be understood as being kind of a jewel in the crown of Tennessee. And we have to look at it that way. And we need to restore the understanding, not just among Tennesseans, but among people in the Southeast, that this city is a real diamond in the rough, if you will, right now. But it can be, again, the capital of the Mid-South. And we have to just keep in mind all of the advantages that Memphis brings to the table. And I think there are many. It's all overshadowed a little bit right now by some of the bad news. We have to get people forward leaning and understanding that we're only limited by our imaginations in terms of what we can achieve here in Memphis.
Okay. Now the Starbucks deal. $30 million in public incentives, and that would be taxpayer money. But from my understanding, the state would reap that within 6 months. From what I've seen in some of your messaging, you're not particularly for Starbucks moving their headquarters to Nashville. Why?
Well, first of all, I would say, as somebody who started a business right here in Tennessee, the best jobs for Tennesseans, the best businesses for Tennessee are the ones that are created right here by Tennessee entrepreneurs, people who take ideas and turn them into thriving businesses. Why? Because they're going to share our values by definition, because they're Tennesseans creating those jobs, and the people that they're going to bring to their businesses are folks right here. So they're going to give jobs to our people in our communities, in our neighborhoods, and that is powerful in terms of how it lifts a community. When we do bring companies into Tennessee, we always should be looking at that through the prism of, does this company, does it fit in with our state? Can it become part of the tapestry of Tennessee that makes sense without disrupting the beauty of our state and without disrupting the values that we all share and have in common? In the case of the Starbucks deal, we're paying $30 million to bring a company here that I think, frankly, if you look at the totality of the circumstances, is just out of step with Tennessee's values. This is one of the most woke, liberal, progressive companies in the country. They were founded in a city that today is considered by many to be unlivable. Many people don't even want to go visit Seattle, Washington these days because of the culture that's developed there and that kind of out of control society that's there. And now we're paying them to bring that to us. And so the ideas that they've championed, I think, are just out of step with our values. And I think we've seen how this story ends. They're going to bring 2,000 people to Tennessee. Those people are going to make roughly twice what normal Tennesseans, everyday average Tennesseans today make. That would be a good thing maybe if those jobs were going to Tennesseans, but it looks like most of them will be people who will be moving here from Seattle, Washington. And so I think that's just probably doesn't end well for us. When we've seen this happen before, those folks show up and they say, hey, we don't think your values are right. We want to change them. And, sometimes they even call us Neanderthals. But I think even Neanderthals knew the difference between a man and a woman, and I'm not sure Starbucks does based on their own advocacy.
Well, you mentioned liberal and woke, and Nashville and then, Shelby County are very diverse parts of the state. So it's hard to think that all Tennesseans would find that as following into Tennessee values if they, if those areas feel the way they do or have large populations that are, in the DEI realm. So I know in your messaging you've said anti-DEI when, Marsha Blackburn seems to be pushing for this Starbucks deal. DEI, rolling back the DEI policies put a lot of minority-owned businesses here at risk of their livelihoods and having a seat at the table. So how do you address the messaging of not bringing Starbucks here because of DEI policies to a predominantly Black and minority area such as Shelby County?
Well, I absolutely support equality. You know, I am in awe of what Dr. Martin Luther King stood for. And, you know, I remember his famous speech where he talked about how he wanted his children, his little babies, to be judged by the content of their character and not the color of their skin. Unfortunately, what diversity, equity in particular, and inclusion have come to mean is absolutely judging people precisely on the color of their skin or other immutable characteristics. And I think that's just at odds at what Dr. King was espousing and fighting for, and frankly gave his life for, and where we are today. So I think that companies like Starbucks are just off track in terms of how they view these policies. And you know, I believe that equity, as it's been defined, as opposed to equality, which I think is an attribute that we should all be striving for. I think that's the very foundation of this country, is that each person ought to have an equal opportunity to succeed. But each person should not be promised an equal outcome, and particularly not promised that based on the color of some of their skin or some other immutable characteristic. And so that's where I think the problem that I see lies with Starbucks. My opponent seems to think that the economic payoff that Starbucks might offer, you know, makes it worth whatever the negatives might be. I don't agree. And of course, I've heard the statistic that we're going to make all this back in 6 months. But her own explanation of this doesn't make sense, because she said, we're going to make this all back with payroll taxes. And as a business owner who knows what payroll taxes are, because I've paid a lot of them or remitted them, the state doesn't even get to keep any of the payroll tax. And so I don't think she knows what she's talking about. So maybe she's talking about proposing a new income tax for Tennessee, perhaps. I don't think so, but perhaps that's what she's saying. So I'm not sure how we're measuring the economic payoff here. And even if arguably there is one, why not take that $30 million and divide it between 600 Tennessee coffee shops and give them each $50,000 and say, start your own coffee brand here in Tennessee, and let's see what that leads to. That's
a good idea. You are the CEO. I hear it in you. All right. Let's move on a little bit more on the inclusion part. Private school vouchers. Oh, you're fine. You can. Yeah, it's okay. It happens.
I thought I did that.
That is okay. So private school vouchers here, we know Governor Bill Lee was a big proponent of this and, you know, expanded the program even. What's your stance on private school vouchers?
Yeah, so, you know, we have a program. That's where all the discussion has been with respect to education in recent years. And so we have a program. It started first as a pilot program for just Shelby County, Davidson County, maybe one or two other large cities, and now it's been expanded statewide. So we have that program. We've been through that fight. The next governor is going to be handed this program and is going to be tasked with the job of seeing if we can make it work. What I've learned from listening to Tennesseans is that far and away, most Tennesseans want parents to have options when it comes to the education of their children. And so the question is, how do we help them obtain those options? And that's really what the voucher program, the Opportunity Scholarships has been about, is there a way for the public to help parents who otherwise might not be able to access options for their children to do so? Mm-hmm. Much has been made of the Shelby County system, in particular the city schools, Memphis City, Shelby County schools, and you know, recent failures in that system, and you know, the difficulty for parents who don't have good options otherwise. And that was kind of the impetus for this. We now have a statewide program. What I would tell you is, if I'm the next governor of Tennessee, there are 2 or 3 things that I would make sure of. Number one, we need transparency about what's going on with that program. Yeah. So we all deserve, as Tennessee taxpayers, parents, stakeholders in the education system, we need to know who's getting those scholarships, who's not getting those scholarships. How is that being decided? We should be able to see all of that. And then we need to be measuring the outcomes. Is this producing the results that are touted that it would produce? You know, Ronald Reagan said many years ago that the closest thing to immortality on this planet is a government program. We need to make sure that this program doesn't have that kind of immortality unless it's working. And so that means you need, a governor who's determined to dig into this and understand whether or not it will work. And I'm committed to do that and see if we can make those options available to parents who otherwise wouldn't be able to obtain options or have choices for their children. We do have to keep some things in mind, though. Today, 89% of our kids are going to graduate from a Tennessee public school. My kids are attending public school. I was a product of a public school. And so the next governor needs to make sure that the public school system is producing results here in Tennessee. If it's failing, then we will fail as a state. Now, could that be different at some point in the future? Perhaps, but that's the reality today. 9 out of 10 of our kids are going to graduate from a public school. So one of the commitments I've made there is that if I'm the next governor, we're going to have a commissioner of education who has spent time teaching in a Tennessee public school classroom. And, unfortunately, that seems kind of obvious that you would want an education commissioner who has been a teacher or has some experience teaching. After all, they're leading 60,000 teachers across the state. And so, unfortunately, that hasn't been true in recent years. And I think it's hard to inspire those 60,000 teachers to do their best work if the person who's leading them doesn't even know what it's like to be in a classroom. It doesn't know the challenges that those teachers are facing every day. And so I made that commitment. I'll apply that across the breadth of state government, by the way, is to find leaders who know what it's like to be in the trenches, who've actually done the work of the people that they're being asked to lead.
Yeah, which brings me to the oversight board here in Memphis Shelby County Schools, a more specific example here. So we've been seeing a lot of just controversy around the governor. Governor Bill Lee's had a big hand in appointing those oversight board members to oversee the elected leaders' decisions around contracts, other budget items, even staffing, and the superintendent included in that, as well as academic policy. But was that the right call? And how do you address people who feel like the voters' rights were infringed upon whenever you appoint a board to carry out the duties that they elected people to do?
Sure. So I think the proof is in the pudding, as they say. The results from Shelby County for a long time, from the Memphis City Shelby County school system, have not been where they should be. And so, as governor, I think it was the right choice, and the legislature, I think they made the right choice to intervene. Because, we've been decades now with declining results here. And so what you have to remember is that in the case of a state, in the case of Tennessee, Tennessee is the sovereign. In other words, Tennessee is that's where the buck stops, is with the state legislature. The state literally creates counties to do its bidding, if you will, to, their administrative conveniences that the state creates to do the work of the state. And so if they're failing to get that work done, then I think the state is justified and in fact obligated to step forward and say, hey, the job's not getting done. We're not getting the results we need. We're going to step in and we're going to put a little bit different supervision in place, and we're going to see if we can get things back on track. I don't think it's a long-term solution. I hope it's not. And if I was governor, I would be committed to helping the city get its house in order, get back on track, start to produce the results. The truancy rate here is off the charts, right? So just one other piece of evidence that the local system's just not getting the job done. Lots of evidence from the audit that was done that there are things that could be done better. And so, just like in business, sometimes you have to step in and make adjustments, and that's what's happening here.
For the sake of time, we have to keep rolling on next topics. Otherwise, I feel like I could take up all the rest of the afternoon with you. But Memphis Safe Task Force, there's been 4 deaths within 60 days. And of course, you can't negate the fact that the task force has helped cut crime down here. But as governor, this would fall under your leadership. Do you have a timeline, or do you have a plan to, at one day, get the task force and the National Guardsmen out of Memphis, or are you more thinking that they'll be here indefinitely, or what's the threshold you need to see to relinquish control back to local authorities? Yeah,
I think at least the current structure isn't permanent. Obviously, we can't afford, for a variety of reasons, to keep the National Guard deployed here indefinitely. That doesn't make sense. And then the federal surge of officers here to Memphis, we can't expect that to continue. And so the question is then, how do we craft a plan that will keep Memphis on track to keeping keeping crime down and really fundamentally changing the environment here so that people in Memphis can thrive. And so I think it's a matter of when, not if, the current posture changes. And then the real trick is to figure out what's the plan going forward. How do we change the way that Memphis and Shelby County are approaching law enforcement in this county to maintain a peaceful community? You mentioned the deaths, always unfortunate. You know, there was a lot of violence. That's part of what brought the task force here. That's part of what the president and the governor were hoping to address and have addressed fairly successfully. Unfortunately, there are always going to be people who are causing trouble and who abuse the rights that they have, and that's what we've seen happen. It's regretful when it happens. Obviously, each of those instances should be looked at closely to make sure that everything is going as it should be. The idea with the National Guard was not for them to come here and be police officers. They were sent here as a show of force to provide a backup. But when they're put in harm's way and they have to take action to defend themselves, then that can be understandable. Again, should always be looked at closely. So, my thoughts for the future are that we have to find a way for the state to assist Shelby County in getting this community where it's safe. I think of the mother who spoke to the task force roundtable that President Trump was at.
Delicia Ballinger.
That's right. Mm-hmm. And Delicia has reached out to me recently, and what I heard her say that was so poignant was how important it was to her that she, for the first time in a long time, felt safe for her kids to be outside, for her to sit on her front porch. That's the measure, right? That's when we know if we were trying to figure out how to measure success, it's when Shelby Countyans feel safe in their communities. And so we have to figure out how to do that. Listen to people, figure out how to do that. It may require changing state law. It probably will. It may require changing our state constitution. I believe it will, so that the state has the opportunity to provide that helping hand to a community like Shelby County when it needs it.
And a component of the Memphis Safe Task Force here is ICE. And there's very polarized sides of how people view immigration enforcement here. I can assume probably that you are staunch on immigration enforcement, but one particular case here, out of many, but there was an 18-year-old Memphis Business Academy student named Yazir Lopez who was on his way to a soccer game and a traffic stop happened and he was detained, put up in Mason, Tennessee, where that detention center is, for 2 months before a federal judge ruled that he was wrongfully detained and let him go because he was detained without bond. And that case is still working itself out. Till today, or as of now, it's not proven that he was a violent offender. I understood the Memphis Safe Task Force was coming in to prioritize violent offenders. When we talk about immigration enforcement, will there be, under your leadership, what's the firm hand look like, and is there a vetting process for immigrants who are detained that have nonviolent pasts and maybe could get on the path to citizenship, or just your whole idea of that?
Sure. So, the courts, federal courts have told us, yes, that could be an all-day question. The federal courts have told us over and over again that primarily, and certainly as it relates to ICE, immigration is the province of the federal government. It's a federal issue. And so then how is the state involved? The state can be involved by cooperating with, supporting, backing up ICE officials. And certainly if I was governor, we would do that. And I would work hard to make sure that every law enforcement agency across the state, certainly the state agencies, but all the local sheriff's departments and city police departments, I would work to make sure that they're cooperating fully with ICE in its task of providing safety and security for the American people. ICE is tasked with making sure that the people that are in this country are here legally. Thankfully, President Trump has gotten the flow of illegals across our southern border under control, and I think that's a positive thing because it means we're not making the problem worse every day. But now we have the question of what do we do and how do we handle the perhaps as many as 10 to 30 million illegals that flowed into the country during the Biden administration. What do we do with them? And how do we approach that? And certainly the president has made it the priority. You know, he's stated clearly the priority is to track down and detain and deport illegal aliens who have been committing crimes here in the country. That's the priority. But we've all seen instances like the one you described where in the process of them detaining those criminal illegal aliens, they sweep up somebody who may not fit that description. And so we've seen some of those circumstances. We do have to keep in mind that if you're here illegally, you're here illegally. I don't buy into the notion that you're an undocumented. You broke the law by coming here. Even if you're young, you broke the law by coming here. You may not be as culpable as somebody who brought you here, but nonetheless you broke the law. And so a nation without borders is no nation at all. And so we simply have to enforce our laws. The beauty of this country is that we accept more legal immigrants every year than any other country in the world. And that's a great thing. We ought to be proud of that. And we need those people to come here because they enrich our lives, they enrich our country. But we want them to become part of America when they come here. We want them to enter the so-called melting pot and assimilate into our country and our culture and accept our values and accept the wonder of what this country has to offer. And so many of them do. So many of them do that correctly by waiting in line, going through the sometimes arduous process of coming here legally. And so it's not fair to them to let others cut line. And so that's why I support the president's approach. You know, he has offered voluntary deportation to so many of the illegals that are here. And well over 2 million now have left the country. And some of those, may come back through the legal process. That's certainly a possibility. And one of the benefits of self-deporting is that you can come back if you get your house in order. And I would support that, obviously, as governor. But I do support the president's efforts, and I assure the people of Tennessee I would do everything to be supportive of making sure that our immigration system welcomes legal immigrants, but does everything within our power to discourage illegal immigration.
Okay, we have hit the 30-minute mark, but I'm going to take 5 more minutes because there's still just a couple lasting points. Data centers,
yes,
which is a huge topic across Tennessee, as you know. We are seeing hesitancy now with data center proposals in East Tennessee that West Tennesseans, particularly Southwest Memphis residents, did not seem to get the same consideration when Elon Musk decided to put his XAI supercomputer there. Yeah. My question is more specifically tailored to, because we're past the point of whether or not the proposal will be here or not. It's here. It's a part of national security intelligence. What would regulation look like to make sure they're not draining city resources, polluting the air? So as governor, how do you have a plan to kind of get a handle on these data centers that are seemingly just in unprecedented times right now? This is a new kind of endeavor that we're seeing in the country.
Sure, and I think there's understandably concern, and that concern is driven by maybe those instances that people have become aware of where data centers have come and it hasn't been a good fit for the local community. And so I think as governor, we would craft a statewide framework for what we ought to look at with respect to data centers to help guide local communities, because I think this should be a local decision. I think we should empower local governments to decide whether this fits for them. You know, there's a data center being looked at in Nashville right now that would be adjacent to the Nashville Zoo. Mm-hmm. And my opponent said, we don't want this here, but I'm sure there's some places out in the country that they could put it and it'd be fine. Well, okay, if those people there want it, just the same as whether or not the people at the zoo want it, So we should empower local communities by giving them the tools to work with to assess whether a data center would be a net contribution to their community and be a positive factor for their community. I've seen there's a data center over in the eastern part of the state that is the second largest user of electricity in its area. It employs 8 people. By contrast, the largest user of electricity employs 1,000 people. So that's an example of a data center that probably didn't make sense for that community because of the resource drain that it created.
Right.
And so then you think about other data centers, including, I would say, the Colossus data center here that, is it's arguably a point of pride, the most powerful supercomputer in all of the world, creating thousands of jobs, and the plan to continue to expand it. And I think it's been paid for by private capital. The state wasn't asked to put money in, and even Elon Musk and XAI have made tremendous contributions to the community. There's still a question, though, as we move forward of, is this a positive for the community? Are all of those jobs and the bragging rights, if you will, for having the most powerful supercomputer in all the world in your community, is that worth it? Obviously, XAI has endeavored to produce a lot of its own power and has proposed contributing to the community by taking sewage water and using it to cool its data center, and then treating it for the community. All of these things are the kinds of, I think, indicators that you want to see, right? That this can be a positive for the community. Those are the kinds of things I think we should be looking for. But we should have an organized plan in Tennessee. We also need to be careful and to note, because we hear about this in Washington through the intelligence community, apparently the Chinese are actually sending money to this country to fund efforts to create protest and to discourage data centers. Well, why would they do that? Because they don't want us to host these data centers. And why did they not want us to host them? Because they want to have them in their country. And then you must ask yourself the question, why do they want to do that? And I think it's because they want to control the computing power of the future. They want to be the leader in artificial intelligence. They want our data living in their country where they can control it. And that we should be careful about that. We've seen in the past, particularly coming out of COVID, what happens when we make ourselves dependent on a sworn enemy elsewhere around the world, and how they might cut us off from the information that we need to go about our everyday pursuits. And so I think we have to be careful, and particularly if they're being nefarious about trying to foster discord here in our country around data centers. And that may be part of what we're seeing, may not be real. It may be astroturf, as they say, created by the Chinese to try to discourage us. But that all aside, we ought to have a plan. We ought to have a set of criteria that we look at, that we can use and give to and help guide local communities as they consider what they want in their local communities.
I don't want to downplay the Southwest residents in Memphis who did protest about their environmental concerns. I would have to push back and say I don't think China funded their efforts. But sure. As this is still unfolding and we're seeing more and more protests, your point there, is valid. We're running out of time. There's one soundbite I wanted to play from your competitor, Senator Marsha Blackburn, about whether or not she was going to do debates. So we'll listen to that really quickly. Will we expect a debate between you and your Republican opponents, or your Democratic opponent after the primary?
The Republicans that are in the race, we have done lots of forums from one end of the state to the other. And we've been on the stage together quite a bit. And I think people know what each of us would do as governor. And I've been very upfront about what I'm going to do as a governor, and always appreciate those opportunities. And I think now it's time to come together and to focus on November and make certain that we're victorious in November and we have the opportunity to serve and do good things for the people of Tennessee.
Okay. So I tried to look up any forums that Senator Blackburn has been on the same stage with you. I could not find any. So is that true? Is that statement true? Did you all have a forum?
It is not a correct statement. We have not had a single forum that she's been a part of. There's been one. It happened this past Friday night in Knoxville, Tennessee. The East Tennessee Young Republicans hosted it, and I was happy to participate in that forum with the other candidate in this race. And so that's just a gross misrepresentation. Now, we've been at events together where we've both spoken, or all three of us have spoken, but never a forum. And I might say, on the second day she was on the campaign trail, on a radio interview, she said she did not plan to do any debates. And so I think you see an intentional effort on her part to mislead Tennesseans, which I think is shameful. I think Tennesseans deserve a debate. We should have a full-force debate with no scripts and rules that allow a back and forth between the candidates, where we're taking unfiltered questions where we have to give unscripted answers so that Tennesseans can see how well we can think on our feet, how well we understand the issues that face Tennessee. And I think Tennesseans deserve that. They ought to demand that. And if one of the candidates is not willing to do that, that should be a factor, it seems to me, in who you choose to be the next governor of the state.
And to put a bow on this interview here, just anything else that you want West Tennesseans to know, Shelby Countyans, Memphians to know about why you deserve their vote?
Yeah, so I think it is back to the issue of me being a CEO. The job of being governor is the job of being CEO of our state. It's a different skill set than what a career legislator has experienced. I've gotten that experience before I went to Congress in the private sector building businesses, so I think I'm ready to roll up my sleeves and go to work on day one. And I hope that Tennesseans will give me a chance to earn their vote. And I do ask for their vote. And I believe I'm the one that's most qualified to take this task on for the future of Tennessee.
All right, Representative Rose, thank you so much for your time. We went into a little bit of overtime because you had so many interesting things to say, and we really could probably take the whole rest of the day, but I know you're a busy man. You've got a whole tour to go on for your campaign, but thank you so much for the time. Thank you so much for watching, and please stay with ABC24 for all of your political coverage. Primaries are August 6th, and then the general election is in November. But for now, thank you for watching.